Delia's feathers ruffled as she watched the scene unfold before her in the elegant living room. Her beady eyes tracked Natalie's every move as she roughly handled baby Paul, her actions hidden from the security cameras by carefully chosen blind spots. The African grey parrot shifted uneasily on her perch, distressed by what she witnessed day after day. Henry and Victoria had adopted Delia years ago, long before Paul came into their lives. The couple worked demanding hours at their respective medical practices, which led them to hire Natalie as Paul's full-time nanny. On the surface, she appeared perfect, experienced, well-recommended, and always properly dressed. But Delia knew better. When Henry and Victoria were home, Natalie was the picture of devotion, cooing at Paul, singing lullabies, and providing detailed reports of their daily activities. The moment they left, however, her demeanor changed completely. Her gentle voice became harsh, her tender touches turned rough, and baby Paul's cries were met with cruel indifference. Delia had always been an unusually perceptive bird, picking up on subtle changes in mood and behavior. Her previous owner, an elderly language professor named Eduardo, had spent years teaching her not just to mimic words, but to understand context and meaning. Now those lessons served a vital purpose as Delia observed the mounting tension in the household. The parrot noticed how Paul would wail in distress whenever Natalie entered the room, how she would grab his tiny arms too tightly when moving him, and how she would ignore his cries for hours. But what troubled Delia most were the whispered phone conversations she overheard late at night when Natalie thought everyone was asleep. "The plan is almost ready," she would murmur into her phone, pacing near Delia's cage. "Once I get access to their accounts, yes, I know what to do with the baby. No one will suspect anything." Delia's vocabulary was extensive, but she struggled to find the right words to communicate the danger. She tried various phrases: bad lady, baby crying, help needed, but Henry and Victoria merely thought she was mimicking random phrases, as parrots often do. Their dismissal of her warnings only made Delia more determined to expose the truth. One evening, while Victoria was feeding Paul before bedtime, Delia noticed Natalie in the kitchen, mixing something into the baby's formula. Her heart raced as she watched Natalie carefully measure drops from a small dark bottle, her movements precise and deliberate. The parrot's instinct screamed that this was wrong. That night, Delia made a decision. She had to find a way to protect Paul, no matter the cost. But how could a parrot convince humans of such a serious threat? As darkness fell over the house, Delia remained awake, her mind working through possible solutions while Natalie's shadowy figure moved through the rooms below, preparing for whatever sinister plan she had in motion. Rachel, Victoria's sister who lived nearby, would sometimes visit with her daughter Olivia. Delia noticed how Natalie's behavior would shift subtly during these visits, a flash of annoyance crossing her face when Rachel appeared unannounced, the way she would hover nearby during conversations, and how she would quickly redirect any questions about Paul's care. As Delia watched Natalie closing the curtains for the night, she caught a glimpse of her true expression in the window's reflection, a cold, calculated look that sent chills through her feathers. The parrot knew time was running out. Tomorrow she would have to find a way to make them understand, or Paul might face consequences too terrible to imagine. The weight of this knowledge kept Delia alert as the house settled into silence. Through the darkness she could hear Paul's soft breathing from the nursery, punctuated by Natalie's footsteps as she moved around downstairs. The parrot's keen ears picked up the sound of drawers opening, papers rustling, and the quiet beep of a phone being used. What Delia didn't realize was that her chance to expose the truth would come sooner than expected, and in a way that would shock everyone in the household. As the night deepened, she remained vigilant, knowing that tomorrow would bring either salvation or disaster for the innocent baby sleeping nearby. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. Delia watched as Victoria prepared for another busy day at the hospital, her movements hurried but gentle, as she kissed Paul goodbye. Henry had already left for an early surgery, leaving Natalie in charge once again. The parrot's anxiety grew as she observed the nanny's practiced transformation. Her warm smile dropping the moment Victoria's car disappeared from view. "Time for your medicine, little one," Natalie cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she approached Paul's high chair. Delia noticed she wasn't carrying the usual medication prescribed by the pediatrician. Instead, she pulled out the mysterious dark bottle from the previous night. Paul began crying immediately, as if sensing something wrong. His tiny hands pushed away the bottle Natalie pressed against his lips. "Stop being difficult," she hissed, her gentle facade cracking. "Just drink it." Delia couldn't contain herself any longer. "No! Bad! Poison!" she screeched, flapping her wings frantically. The sudden outburst startled Natalie, causing her to drop the bottle. It shattered on the kitchen floor, its contents spreading in a sinister puddle. Natalie's face contorted with rage. "Stupid bird," she snarled, advancing toward Delia's cage. "You've been watching me too closely, haven't you?" Her fingers gripped the cage bars tightly. "Well, we'll have to do something about that." Just then, Rachel's voice called from the front door. "Hello? Anyone home?" She had a habit of dropping by unannounced, much to Natalie's constant irritation. The nanny quickly composed herself, kicking the broken glass under the cabinet and wiping the spilled liquid with her shoe. "We're in the kitchen," Natalie called back, her voice honey-sweet once again. Delia watched as she hastily cleaned up the evidence, noting how she stuffed the glass shards into her pocket rather than the trash. Rachel entered with young Olivia in tow, carrying a basket of fresh muffins. Her eyes immediately went to Paul, who was still crying. "Is everything okay? He seems upset." "Oh, he's just being fussy about his breakfast," Natalie explained smoothly. "For you know how babies can be." She lifted Paul from his high chair, bouncing him with apparent affection. But Delia noticed something else, a small notebook that had fallen from Natalie's pocket during her hasty cleanup. It lay partially hidden under the kitchen table, its pages containing what looked like numbers and notes in her precise handwriting. While the women chatted, Olivia wandered over to Delia's cage. The young girl had always been fascinated by the parrot, often sharing secrets with her during her visits. "Hello, Delia," she whispered, slipping her a piece of her muffin through the cage bars. Delia saw her opportunity. "Help Paul," she whispered back, remembering how Eduardo had taught her to string words together meaningfully. "Bad lady hurts baby." Olivia's eyes widened. Unlike the adults who dismissed Delia's warnings as random chatter, children often paid more attention to animals. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. "Poison in bottle," Delia continued, her voice low but urgent. "Notes under table." Olivia glanced at the kitchen table, noticing the notebook with the casual curiosity of a child. She walked over and picked it up before anyone could stop her. "What's this?" she asked innocently. Natalie's reaction was instant and violent. She practically shoved Paul into Rachel's arms and lunged for the notebook. "That's private," she snapped, her careful mask slipping again. The sudden movement and harsh tone made Paul wail louder, and even Olivia stepped back in surprise. Rachel, still holding the crying baby, noticed the strange tension in the room. "Is everything all right, Natalie? You seem different." "Everything's fine," Natalie insisted, clutching the notebook to her chest, but her composed facade had cracked, revealing something darker underneath. "I think it's time for Paul's nap. Perhaps you could visit another time." Rachel didn't move. Instead, she looked more closely at Paul, noticing for the first time the slight bruising on his arms, where Natalie had gripped him too tightly. Her maternal instincts, already aroused by the tense atmosphere, went into higher alert. "I think I'll stay for a while," Rachel said firmly, her voice taking on a steely edge that Delia had never heard before. "In fact, I might call Victoria and see if she can come home early today." Natalie's expression shifted again, calculating and cold. "That won't be necessary. I have everything under control." She reached for Paul, but Rachel took a step back. "Olivia, honey," Rachel said calmly, though her eyes never left Natalie, "why don't you go call Aunt Victoria? Use my phone. It's in my purse by the door." Delia watched the scene unfold with growing tension. She could see Natalie's hands twitching, her eyes darting between Rachel, Paul, and the front door. The notebook she held contained evidence of something, perhaps her plans, her true intentions, or worse. "Hurt baby," Delia screeched again, louder this time. "Bad lady. Poison." "That bird has been nothing but trouble," Natalie said, her voice tight with anger. always making noise, interfering with Paul's sleep. I've suggested to Victoria that we should get rid of it. Really? Rachel replied, her suspicion growing. Victoria loves that parrot. She's had Delia for years, and she's never mentioned anything about getting rid of her. The tension in the kitchen was broken by the sound of Olivia's voice from the hallway. Aunt Victoria, can you come home? Something's wrong with Natalie. Natalie's composure shattered completely. She made a sudden move toward the front door, but Rachel blocked her path. You're not going anywhere until Victoria gets here, Rachel declared, her free arm extended to prevent Natalie from passing. Delia watched as Natalie's face transformed into something truly frightening. Gone was any pretense of the caring nanny, replaced by a calculating coldness that confirmed every suspicion she'd had. You don't understand, Natalie said, her voice barely above a whisper. This was supposed to be perfect. I had everything planned. The baby would get sick, nothing too serious at first, but with my special medicine he would get worse instead of better. Victoria and Henry would be devastated, too distracted to notice the missing money until it was too late. Rachel gasped, instinctively holding Paul tighter. You were going to poison... Bad lady, poison baby, Delia screeched again. The sound of a car screeching to a halt outside made everyone freeze. Footsteps pounded up the front walk. Victoria had arrived home in record time, likely breaking several speed limits in the process. The scene she burst in on would be forever etched in her memory. Rachel backing away from Natalie, clutching Paul protectively. Olivia hiding behind her mother, Delia flapping and screeching in her cage, and Natalie looking nothing like the caring nanny she'd pretended to be, holding a notebook full of secrets that were about to be revealed. The next few moments would change everything, but Delia knew her job wasn't finished yet. There were still darker truths to be uncovered, and the full extent of Natalie's plans had yet to come to light. The parrot watched intently as Victoria took in the scene before her, knowing that the real storm was just beginning. Victoria stood frozen in the doorway, her medical coat still on, stethoscope dangling from her neck. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. Her eyes darted between her sister holding Paul, Natalie's threatening stance, and Delia's agitated state. What's going on here? Victoria demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to handling crisis situations. Before anyone could answer, Delia's voice rang out clear and precise, shocking everyone with its clarity. She hurts baby. Poison in bottle. Look under cabinet. The parrot's words were unmistakable this time, no longer random phrases, but a coherent warning. Victoria's eyes widened as she processed this unexpected revelation. Natalie lunged for her purse, but Rachel was quicker. Olivia, grab that bag, she called to her daughter. The young girl snatched Natalie's purse just as the nanny reached for it, spilling its contents across the floor. Among the scattered items was a collection of vials, syringes, and what appeared to be hospital prescription pads. Victoria gasped as she recognized the labels on the vials. As a doctor, she knew exactly what they were. Powerful sedatives and medications that should never be anywhere near a baby. Those are from my hospital, she whispered, the horror of realization dawning on her face. How did you get these? Natalie's composure cracked completely. Her laugh was hollow and bitter. You doctors think you're so clever, don't you? Always too busy saving other people's lives to notice what's happening in your own home. Did you know your precious Paul cries for hours when you're gone? That he flinches when I come near him? Rachel held Paul tighter, noting the slight tremor in his tiny body at the sound of Natalie's voice. The baby's reaction spoke volumes about what he had endured. Check her notebook, Delia squawked insistently. Numbers! Plans! Victoria picked up the fallen notebook, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. Inside were detailed notes about the family's schedule, bank account numbers, and what appeared to be calculations for steadily increasing doses of various medications. It was perfect, Natalie spat, her facade completely gone now. I had access to everything, your home, your baby, your accounts. The plan was simple. Make the baby sick slowly, just enough to worry you, but not enough to raise suspicion. While you were distracted with his declining health, I would handle your finances, your bills, your accounts. Handle our accounts? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Your signatures weren't hard to forge, Natalie continued, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. And grieving parents rarely check their bank statements carefully. By the time Paul's condition became critical, I would have transferred enough money to disappear completely. The devastated parents would be too broken to notice the missing funds until it was far too late. The sound of Paul's whimper cut through the tension like a knife. Victoria took a step forward, her professional calm warring with maternal fury. "How many times?" she demanded. "How many times did you hurt my baby?" Natalie's silence was more damning than any answer could have been. Delia, however, had more to reveal. "Night medicine, bad medicine, show them, show them." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What's she talking about?" "The cabinet," Olivia piped up, remembering Delia's earlier warning. "She said to look under the cabinet." Victoria dropped to her knees, reaching under the kitchen cabinet where Natalie had kicked the broken bottle earlier. Her hand emerged with shards of dark glass, still wet with an unknown liquid. What was in this bottle? Victoria's voice was deadly quiet. Before Natalie could respond, the front door opened again. Henry had arrived, likely called by Olivia when she contacted Victoria. His presence seemed to trigger something in Natalie, perhaps the realization that her carefully constructed plan was completely unraveling. "You don't understand," she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "This wasn't just about the money. I wanted to prove a point. All you wealthy doctors with your perfect lives, thinking you can buy good childcare like you buy everything else. You never really checked my references, did you? Never really verified my credentials." Henry's face drained of color. As if in answer to his unspoken question, Delia began rattling off names. Jessica Thompson, Michael Anderson, Baby James. Names that meant nothing to the family but clearly meant something to Natalie, judging by her reaction. "Shut up!" she screamed at the parrot. "Shut up! Shut up!" But Delia wouldn't be silenced. "Other babies, other families. Look them up." Victoria pulled out her phone with trembling hands, quickly searching the names Delia had spoken. Her face grew paler with each search result. They're all families who lost babies under mysterious circumstances. All of them had nannies who disappeared afterward. The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Natalie wasn't just a fraud. She was something far more sinister. A systematic predator who had made a career out of targeting wealthy families, harming their children, and disappearing with their money. Henry moved with surprising speed for someone who had just finished a long surgery. He positioned himself between Natalie and the door, his voice steady despite the anger evident in his eyes. "The police are already on their way." Rachel called them right after she contacted Victoria. Natalie's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. She seemed to be calculating her chances, weighing her options. The sound of distant sirens made her decision for her. She bolted toward the back door, but she hadn't counted on Delia. The parrot had been watching, waiting for just such a moment. As Natalie ran past her cage, she extended her wing through the bars, catching her sleeve. The unexpected snag was enough to throw her off balance. She stumbled, crashing into the kitchen table. The fall sent her crashing to the floor, the contents of her pockets scattering across the tile. Among them was a small USB drive that skittered under the refrigerator. Delia's sharp eyes caught its trajectory. "Evidence!" she screeched. "Under fridge! More proof!" The sirens were getting closer now. Natalie lay on the floor, the fight seeming to drain out of her, as she realized there was nowhere left to run. But there was something in her eyes, a cold, calculating look that suggested this wasn't over yet. The police were pulling up outside, their red and blue lights painting the kitchen walls in alternating colors. But Delia kept her eyes fixed on Natalie, remembering something she had overheard during one of her late-night phone conversations. Something about a backup plan and insurance. The parrot had a feeling they hadn't uncovered all of Natalie's secrets yet, and the worst might be yet to come. Victoria held Paul close, tears streaming down her face as she examined every inch of her baby, cataloguing any signs of abuse or neglect she might have missed. Henry stood guard over Natalie, his doctor's oath to do no harm, visibly warring with his paternal instincts. But it was Rachel who noticed something odd about the way Natalie was lying on the floor. Despite her fall, despite being caught, there was a slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. It was the smile of someone who knew something others didn't. someone who still had cards left to play. As the police entered the kitchen, Delia ruffled her feathers uneasily. Her warnings had helped expose Natalie's immediate plans, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. Whatever Natalie was still hiding, whatever her backup plan entailed, Delia would remain vigilant until all her secrets were exposed and Paul was truly safe. The kitchen had transformed into a crime scene. Police officers photographed evidence while detectives interviewed family members. Paul had been taken to the hospital for a thorough examination, with Victoria accompanying him. Henry remained behind to assist with the investigation, his medical expertise proving valuable in identifying the various substances found in Natalie's possession. Delia watched from her cage as an officer retrieved the USB drive from under the refrigerator. Her sharp eyes hadn't missed how Natalie's slight smile had widened when they plugged it into a laptop. Something wasn't right. "Careful, trap, trap!" Delia screeched, but her warning came too late. The moment the drive was accessed, every computer in the house began emitting a harsh beeping sound. Screens flickered and went dark, and the home security system suddenly deactivated. "It's a virus," one of the officers announced. "She's wiped everything. Security footage, computer files, everything that could have contained evidence of her activities." But Natalie's satisfaction was short-lived. Rachel stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Not everything," she said. "I've been recording since I arrived this morning. Every confession, every threat. It's all here." The smirk vanished from Natalie's face. She hadn't counted on Rachel's quick thinking, hadn't factored in the protective instincts of a sister who had sensed something wrong the moment she walked in. Meanwhile, Olivia tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, remember when Delia started talking to me? I did what you always taught me. I took notes in my diary. Everything she said, everything I saw." The detective's interest was immediately piqued. "You have notes. From how long ago?" Olivia nodded earnestly. "I write down everything when we visit. Delia started trying to tell me things weeks ago, but I didn't understand at first. Then I started noticing things too. How Paul would cry when Natalie came near. How she would act differently when she thought no one was watching." The detective gathered Olivia's diary as evidence, praising her observant nature. But Delia remained agitated. There was still something else, something important they were missing. "Phone calls, night talks," she squawked insistently. "Others involved." This caught everyone's attention. The detective turned to Natalie, who had gone notably pale. "Other people involved? Care to explain?" Natalie's silence spoke volumes. The detective signaled to his partner, who began reviewing the call logs from Natalie's seized phone. The numbers told a disturbing story, regular calls to multiple burner phones, all during late-night hours. "She's part of a network," Henry realized, his voice heavy with horror. "She's not working alone." As if confirming his words, Natalie's phone suddenly lit up with a message. Before anyone could stop her, she managed to glance at it, and her composed mask slipped completely. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "You don't understand," she whispered, all pretense gone. "They'll come for me. They always come for anyone who gets caught." The detective leaned forward. "Who will come for you, Natalie? Give us names and we can protect you." But Natalie shook her head violently. "You can't protect me. Nobody can. They're everywhere. Hospitals, childcare agencies, reference services. How do you think we get our credentials? How do you think we find our targets?" The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about one malicious nanny. It was about an organized group targeting vulnerable families through seemingly legitimate channels. Delia, however, wasn't finished. She began rattling off more names, addresses, and fragments of conversations she'd overheard during Natalie's late-night calls. Each word was another piece of evidence, another thread unraveling a conspiracy that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. The detective was furiously taking notes, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "We're going to need witness protection," he muttered to his partner. "For all of them." Henry's phone rang. It was Victoria calling from the hospital. The examination had revealed traces of various substances in Paul's system, but thankfully nothing had caused permanent damage. They had caught Natalie's scheme before she could fully implement her sinister plans. But as relief washed over the room, Delia noticed something that made her feathers stand on end. Natalie's fear had vanished, replaced by that calculating look she knew so well. She was watching the officers catalogue evidence, her eyes tracking every bag, every document. The parrot suspected she was already planning her next move. "Watch her. Don't trust," Delia warned, drawing attention back to Natalie just as her hand moved toward her collar. A sharp-eyed officer caught the movement and rushed forward, discovering a hidden needle. "Suicide pill," the officer announced, securing the evidence. Classic spy technique. She wasn't planning to live long enough to talk. This discovery changed everything. The detective immediately called for additional security. Natalie would need to be watched constantly, both to prevent her from harming herself and to protect her from whoever she was working with. As Natalie was led away in handcuffs, she passed by Delia's cage. For a brief moment, their eyes met. In that instant, Delia saw something in her expression that chilled her to her core. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Back at the hospital, Victoria held Paul close, grateful for his safety but shaken by how close they'd come to disaster. The baby was recovering well, his system already clearing the foreign substances Natalie had administered, but the psychological impacts would take longer to heal, both for Paul and his parents. Rachel arrived at the hospital with Olivia, bringing updated news from the investigation. The police were uncovering more evidence with each passing hour. Natalie's USB drive, despite destroying local files, had left traces that computer forensics might be able to recover. More importantly, Olivia's diary and Rachel's recording provided solid evidence that couldn't be erased. But Delia, watching from her travel cage Henry had insisted on bringing to the hospital, knew there were still threads to unravel. Natalie's network was vast, and they had only scratched the surface. The parrot kept her vigilant watch, ready to protect her family from whatever dangers still lurked in the shadows. As night fell over the hospital, Victoria made a decision. She had installed security cameras throughout their house, but had always felt it was unnecessary to put one in Paul's room, trusting Natalie completely. That trust had nearly cost them everything. She vowed never to be so naive again. Delia settled into her temporary perch in Paul's hospital room, her presence bringing comfort to both the baby and his parents. The parrot might have exposed one threat, but she sensed that their ordeal wasn't over. Somewhere out there, Natalie's associates were watching, waiting, planning their next move. And Delia would be ready when they made it. The investigation was expanding, reaching into dark corners of the childcare industry that few had suspected existed. But for now, in the quiet hospital room, Delia focused on what mattered most, keeping watch over the sleeping baby whose life she had helped save, while remaining alert for any sign of the storms she knew were still to come. The hospital room had become a temporary fortress. Officers were stationed outside, and only pre-approved medical staff could enter. Paul was recovering well, but Victoria and Henry remained on high alert, scrutinizing every person who came near their son. Delia maintained her vigilant watch from her new perch, installed especially in the hospital room. Her presence had a calming effect on Paul, who would smile and reach for the parrot whenever he was awake. The bond between them had grown stronger through their shared ordeal. Detective Wilson, who had been assigned to lead the investigation, arrived with troubling news. "We've been digging into Natalie's background," he explained to Victoria and Henry. "Everything about her, her credentials, her references, even her identity, it's all fabricated. But the forgeries are professional grade. This isn't the work of one person." Rachel, who had taken temporary leave from her job to support her sister, was helping piece together the evidence from Olivia's diary. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one of her daughter's entries. "Olivia wrote down something interesting Delia said weeks ago about Natalie talking to someone about the next family and moving up the coast." The detective's expression darkened. "That matches our theory. We've uncovered similar cases up and down the coastline. Wealthy families, mysterious nanny figures, children getting sick, money disappearing. But every time someone got close to making a connection, evidence would vanish and witnesses would go silent." Delia suddenly became agitated, hopping from foot to foot on her perch. "Phone in plant! Phone in plant!" she screeched, pointing her beak toward a decorative potted plant in the corner of the room. Detective Wilson carefully approached the plant, and reaching deep into the soil, pulled out a small burner phone. It was still warm, recently used. She must have hidden it during one of her hospital visits, Henry realized, remembering how Natalie had brought fresh flowers every few days, always insisting on arranging them herself. The phone was quickly sealed in an evidence bag, but Delia wasn't finished. More phones, home plant, office plant. The detective immediately dispatched officers to search all the planters in Victoria and Henry's home and offices. Each one yielded another hidden phone or recording device. Natalie had been monitoring them far more extensively than anyone had realized. Meanwhile, in the hospital's computer lab, tech experts were working to recover data from the virus-infected systems. Despite Natalie's attempts to destroy everything, fragments of information remained. "It's a complete surveillance operation," the lead technician explained. "She wasn't just monitoring your activities, she was gathering information about your colleagues, your patients, your banking habits. Everything about your lives was being catalogued and analyzed." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. "But why? Why go to such lengths?" "Because you weren't the only targets," Detective Wilson explained. "We've identified similar surveillance patterns at other hospitals up the coast. They're profiling medical professionals, doctors, surgeons, specialists, people with high incomes, demanding schedules, and young children." Henry's medical training kicked in as he processed this information. "They're looking for specific vulnerabilities, families where both parents work long hours, where they'd need to rely heavily on childcare." "Exactly," the detective confirmed. "And they're patient. They spend months, sometimes years, gathering intelligence before making their move." Delia, who had been listening intently, suddenly perked up. "Window! Look, window!" Everyone turned to the hospital room's window. In the building across the street, a figure quickly ducked out of sight. Detective Wilson immediately radioed for officers to search the building, but Delia's warning had come too late. By the time they reached the opposite building, they found only an abandoned camera setup and a half-drunk cup of coffee, still warm. They were being watched. The discovery prompted immediate action. The hospital room was moved to an interior location with no windows. Security was doubled, but the incident had shaken everyone's sense of safety. That evening, as Paul slept peacefully in his new room, Victoria watched Delia standing guard. The parrot hadn't relaxed her vigilance for a moment, her head turning at every sound, her bright eyes scanning constantly for threats. "You've been protecting him all along, haven't you?" she whispered to Delia. "Even before we knew there was danger." Delia bobbed her head once, then spoke with unexpected clarity. "Family protect family." The simple statement brought tears to Victoria's eyes. She reached out and gently stroked Delia's feathers. Yes, we do. And your family too." Meanwhile, the investigation was expanding. Detective Wilson had set up a command center in an unused hospital conference room. Maps covered the walls, showing locations of similar cases connected by red strings. Photos of suspected network members, most only partially glimpsed on security cameras, were grouped together, forming a shadowy organizational chart. But it was Olivia's diary that provided the most crucial breakthrough. Her childish entries, faithfully recording Delia's warnings and her own observations, contained details that might otherwise have been missed. She had noted down snippets of phone conversations, descriptions of visitors, even small changes in Paul's behavior that adults had overlooked. "Look at this," Rachel said, pointing to one entry. Olivia wrote that 3 weeks ago, Delia became very upset when a delivery man came to the house. She thought it was strange because Delia usually likes visitors. The detective quickly cross-referenced the date. "There was no scheduled delivery that day. None of your regular services reported being in your neighborhood," Henry frowned. "Someone was scouting the house, probably documenting security measures, escape routes." The detective's voice trailed off as he noticed Delia's increasing agitation. The parrot was pacing on her perch, clearly distressed. "Coming soon, she warned. Before anyone could question what she meant, the hospital's lights flickered and went out. Emergency generators kicked in immediately, but in those few seconds of darkness, Delia's warning took on a new urgency. They were about to discover that Natalie's network wasn't just watching, they were preparing to act. The hospital's emergency generators cast an eerie glow through the corridors. In Paul's room, Delia's agitation reached new heights. "They hear! They hear!" she screeched, her eyes fixed on the door. Detective Wilson immediately radioed for backup, but the response was garbled. Someone was jamming their communications. In the confusion, a figure in hospital scrubs slipped into the room, moving with practiced efficiency. But Delia was ready. The moment the intruder reached for Paul's crib, the parrot launched herself from her perch, wings spread wide, creating enough of a distraction for Henry to tackle the would-be kidnapper. More officers rushed in, and the intruder was quickly subdued. When they removed the surgical mask, everyone gasped. The face belonged to one of Natalie's regular references, a woman who had vouched for her credentials. She was part of the network. "It's over," Detective Wilson declared, securing the suspect. "We've got her accomplice." But Delia remained agitated. More coming." She was right. The power outage had been a coordinated effort across the hospital. Security cameras caught glimpses of other figures in scrubs, all converging on their location. The network was making its move, determined to silence Natalie's victims before she could expose them. What they hadn't counted on was Olivia. The young girl, who had been staying with her mother in a nearby room, had continued her habit of taking notes. She had noticed and recorded suspicious activities throughout the hospital, staff members she didn't recognize, maintenance workers in areas they shouldn't be, unusual patterns in shift changes. Thanks to her observations, the police were able to quickly identify and apprehend the infiltrators one by one. The fake hospital staff were caught, each arrest revealing more about the network's operations. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The USB drive that had initially seemed to destroy evidence had actually created a hidden backup, automatically uploading data to a secure server. The virus had been a smokescreen designed to make the network think their tracks were covered. Natalie, it turned out, had been playing both sides. While working for the criminal network, she had also been gathering evidence against them, building her own insurance policy. When cornered, she had activated the backup, ensuring that if she went down, she wouldn't go down alone. The final confrontation came as dawn broke over the hospital. The network's leadership, realizing their operation was compromised, made one last desperate attempt to contain the situation, but they had underestimated the power of a family united in protection of their youngest member. Delia, ever vigilant, spotted the final intruder, the network's leader, attempting to access the hospital through a service entrance. Her warning allowed the police to set up a perfect ambush, and the mastermind behind the operation was finally captured. In the aftermath, the full scope of the network's activities came to light. They had been operating for years, targeting wealthy families across the country. Natalie's detailed records, combined with Olivia's diary entries and Delia's testimony, carefully translated and documented, provided enough evidence to dismantle the entire organization. Paul's examination revealed that, thanks to Delia's early warnings, he had suffered no lasting effects from Natalie's treatments. The psychological trauma would take time to heal, but surrounded by love and support, his natural resilience began to shine through. Victoria and Henry made significant changes to their lives. They adjusted their work schedules to spend more time at home, and when they did need childcare, they implemented rigorous verification processes. But more importantly, they learned to trust their instincts and to listen to those who showed genuine care for their family. Delia was hailed as a hero. Her story made headlines, highlighting the remarkable bond between animals and humans and the importance of paying attention to their warnings. But for Delia, the greatest reward was simply being with her family, watching Paul grow stronger each day. Olivia's diary became a crucial piece of evidence in multiple cases, and her observant nature earned her special recognition from the police department. Her experience inspired her to start a peer support group for children to help them recognize and report suspicious behavior. Rachel and her family moved closer to Victoria and Henry, strengthening their family bonds. The sisters realized that together they were stronger and better able to protect what mattered most. As for Natalie and her network, justice was served. The evidence was overwhelming, and the sentences were severe. The organization was dismantled, its members scattered or imprisoned. But perhaps more importantly, their exposure led to major reforms in childcare licensing and verification processes. One quiet evening, as the family gathered in their newly secured home, Delia watched Paul playing safely on the floor. The baby looked up at his feathered protector and smiled, a pure, joyful expression that made all their trials worthwhile. "Family safe now," Delia declared softly, settling onto her perch. Victoria smiled, reaching out to stroke her feathers. "Yes, Delia. Thanks to you, we're all safe now." Paul grew into a happy, healthy child with no memory of his early trauma. But the story of Delia, the parrot who saved him, became a cherished family legend, passed down as a testament to the power of love, vigilance, and the unexpected heroes who sometimes enter our lives. The experience changed them all. They learned that real family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the bonds we forge through trust, protection, and unconditional love. And sometimes those bonds can come from the most unexpected sources, like a brave parrot who refused to stay silent in the face of danger. Delia remained their faithful guardian, her watchful eyes never wavering in their protection of the family she loved. Her warnings had not only saved Paul, but had exposed a darker side of the childcare industry, leading to changes that would protect countless other families in the future. And so their story became one of hope, proof that even in our darkest moments, heroes can emerge from unexpected places, and love can triumph over evil as long as we have the courage to listen and act when warnings come our way. They all learned a profound lesson. Sometimes the most important voices are the ones we least expect to speak, and sometimes, when those voices try to warn us, the most crucial thing we can do is simply listen. In Delia's case, her ability to communicate, painstakingly taught by her previous owner, had become the thin line between tragedy and salvation. It wasn't just about the words she knew, it was about her determination to use them when it mattered most. Victoria, who had once overlooked Delia's warnings as random mimicry, now understood the depth of intelligence and emotion behind the parrot's behavior. She made it her mission to spread awareness about how animals often sense danger long before humans do, and how their attempts to alert us should never be dismissed. The criminal network's exposure had far-reaching consequences. Investigations revealed similar operations in other cities, all following the same pattern of targeting busy professionals with young children. Lawmakers responded with stricter regulations for childcare services and enhanced background check systems designed to catch even the most sophisticated false credentials. Henry became an advocate for work-life balance in the medical profession, knowing firsthand how their demanding careers had made them vulnerable. He helped implement programs at his hospital that made it easier for medical professionals to be present for their families without sacrificing their careers. Rachel's quick thinking and protectiveness had played a crucial role in saving Paul. The sisters, once separated by busy lives and geographic distance, now shared a deeper bond. They understood that family meant being there for each other, not just in emergencies, but in everyday moments. Olivia's detailed diary entries not only helped convict Natalie and her accomplices, but also taught her the value of paying attention to details that adults might overlook. Her childhood habit of recording observations had literally saved lives. Now, she was teaching other children to trust their instincts and speak up when something felt wrong. Detective Wilson used the case to reform how law enforcement responded to reports of suspicious childcare providers. Where once such claims might have been dismissed without concrete evidence, now they were taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. He never forgot how a parrot's warnings, a child's diary, and a concerned aunt had cracked open one of the largest criminal enterprises he'd ever encountered. The reporters who covered the story initially focused on the sensational aspects, the elaborate scheme, the dramatic rescue, the network of criminals. But the element that resonated most deeply with the public was the simple loyalty of a pet who had refused to stay silent when her family was in danger. Delia's fame faded as the years passed, but her legacy endured. When visitors came to the house, they would often hear the story of the parrot who spoke up at just the right moment, and Delia, with the wisdom of her years, would sometimes add her own postscript. Listen well, watch close, speak truth. Simple words from a remarkable guardian who understood that sometimes the greatest courage is simply refusing to be silent when those you love are at risk. And in that lesson was perhaps the most valuable truth of all, that love, in its purest form, always finds a way to protect what matters most. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.